Too many leaders lead for validation, not impact, for what they can get out of it more than what they can give to it. Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm obsessed with how leaders grow and develop, and I too have insecure moments. We all do. Glad you're here with me now on the Sight Shift podcast so you can learn how to lead for impact, not validation.
Well, welcome into the Sight Shift podcast. I'm Mark. He's Chris.
I think so.
At least today, you can be Chris. And we are back for another episode. Glad you are with us as well. If you recall the last episode, we kicked off a series that we're calling the Lead for Impact series that's based on the book that's most recently released. You can get your copy wherever you get your copies. But we're working our way through that book, an episode at a time. And we're going to get into the second episode today. But before we do that, I wanted to just set the stage for where we left off with last episode so we can jump into this one. If you recall, we posed a big question. It's this big idea of, are you leading for validation or are you leading for impact? I don't know about you, but that question continues to mess me up.
Yeah. I think for me, it's so fun because we hear from organizations all the time when we kick off and we take them through just really a health check on their culture. Like, this is where you're going to show up. These are the risk factors. These are the insecurities. This is how you're going to get in your own way. By far, what people say back to us is the concept that helps them get everything in an initiatory way, but also just continue to deepen. And it's how they explain it. When they go home, they're like, okay, we hear this all the time. This wasn't like any other leadership training. And they're trying to explain it to their spouse or whatever. It is this concept that is the stickiest, that helps them orient everything else. Are you leading for impact or validation?
I had a day not too long ago. And as I was reflecting on the day, I realized 3 different moments the question came to me or came into play. The first was I was on my way somewhere, probably here in the morning, and somebody pulled in front of me. They did not get up to my speed as fast as I wanted them to. And so I let them know impatiently I was right behind them.
And thankfully, you know what I drive.
It wasn't you. But there's a moment for validation. I was not driving for impact. I was driving for my own validation. Later on in the day, I'm in a coaching session with someone, and he's in the middle of this big push, this thing that he launched, this new venture that he launched. He's past the honeymoon stage. He's in that messy middle of like figuring it out, and I'm tired, and some of that may come into play in what we're going to talk about here next. But I was working through that with him in a coaching context, and I could have gone right to, let's just fix the problem as it was presenting. Let's just fix it. And instead, we sat in the discomfort, and I took him back to the beginning, like, hey, remind me and yourself again why you started this thing. And there was silence, there were tears. And then it was just this energy shift of finding the new motivation to go after the thing. Impact, not validation. Yeah. The third one was later in the day. We were in a family situation, and I'll talk around this so as to still honor my kids and not give away too many details.
Name names.
I know. But one of my kids didn't do something in this family context that I thought should have been done. And I had the parenting wisdom and foresight to not address it in the moment, to wait. We always have fun in my family because I'm reminding them it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But lately I've also added and when. It's how and when. So I waited for a better when. And came at it from the perspective of impact versus you didn't do this, dad trying to prove something in that moment, versus, hey, what was going through your mind and what do you want to happen in this context? And it was an impact moment. So like in one day, 3 different times, this question continues to mess me up.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm reflecting back on moments just in the weekend. It's Monday when we record this. And, weekends are different routines than a normal weekday. And as much as I have things in place to give me rhythms that I want, still, you're in places where the plan isn't always going like you thought. And so, quick for me is to try to either impose an agenda
Mhm.
or just give up, and which I'm going to later be bothered by. And instead, it's like, okay, how do I walk through this moment in such a way that somebody else is getting what they need, I'm getting what I need, and we can walk through it without tiptoeing, without being harmful and direct and intense in a way that's not
Yeah.
helpful. And so it comes back to that question. Yeah, okay. Why do I need my schedule to go this certain way? Is it because I want something validated? Like, you understand I have some responsibilities, I got to take care of this? Or can I just go, you know what? I don't have to have that validated.
Mhm.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yes.
That's good.
So the question continues to give. It's like that great Christmas gift that just keeps on giving
Yeah.
and giving, even though it feels like it's messing me up at times.
Yeah.
It is messing me up for better. And that's my experience is for sure just my experience, but it's not just my experience. That's what we're finding again and again. That this idea, this question continues to mess people up in a good way. So that's what we set up last episode. This episode, is it fair if I call it a model for understanding what kind of leads up what leads up to the decision of, am I going to go down the
Mm.
validation path or the impact path? The impact leaders
Mm-hmm.
struggle, if you will. And then we're going to introduce a tool.
Mm.
So kind of like this universal model of how things will play out as leaders pursue their ambitions, and a tool that one can use on a regular basis just to check yourself, as you like to say, before you wreck yourself. So that's where we're headed in this episode. And so I wonder if we can just start with this impact leaders struggle, this model
Yeah.
that is part of what's introduced in the second chapter of this book. Talk us through, if you would, what this model is like and how we can relate to it and understand it.
Awesome. First off, though, I have to tell you that you may not know this, but online there's now a drinking game that I'm participating in. Every time we say the word validation, I take a drink. Maybe kidding, maybe serious. No. So if I'm going to set it up, the biggest thing to set up here is you don't know it, but as a leader, like, a key thing that you have is the ability to have an expectation.
Mm.
Like, you have an expectation for the day, you have an expectation for the week, you have an expectation for where the company can go, for how the team can develop, for who this person can become. All of that is a really positive attribute of leadership. But what happens is it becomes a negative. That superpower becomes a kryptonite because you actually start approaching moments the same way. And if we could, like, put a thought in your brain that deepens all this today, it would just be understanding you have to be able to recognize that expectation for validation.
Mm.
So when you're going home and it's been a really hard week and you're like, I just want to drive up and I want to walk in the door and I want everybody to go, you've had a hard week. And we recognize that, we validate that, and then whatever else follows particular to your needs and desires. The problem is, or I just need this meeting to go easy or whatever. When you're approaching it that way, you have this expectation for your own validation, and you are going to suffer and you're going to lead in an unhealthy way because, again, you're doing it for what you get out of it. So the impact leader's struggle is just about introducing this idea that the expectation you have, and the word we use is like ambition. You want something. You want to see it get better. That's the nature of leadership. If there's no ambition, if there's no desire, if there's no, this could be better, this could be transformative, this could be powerful, this could be life-changing, whatever it is, then you're dead in the water. I mean, that's the necessary beginning of leadership. But that ambition creates a struggle. And I'm not sure how far I'm supposed to go right
Yeah,
now,
keep
but
going. Yep.
that ambition sets this struggle up because it's like there's always a gap between your vision and your resources. If there's no gap between your vision and your resources, then your vision is self-evident and you don't really need to be leading. So that gap, if that gap is there, it means you're not dead. Good job. It means there's a leadership function that needs to be done. This ambition is here. I want to see this happen. There's a gap between that. It could be a personal vision, a company vision, team vision, whatever. And that gap is where the struggle shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And in that struggle, you're going to face a crossroads. And the crossroads that you'll be at over and over and over again is, am I doing this for what I can get out of it or what I can give to it? And you know, the application here, as we've been reinforcing, is endless. You know, I was recently working with somebody, and this isn't the nature of what we do, but it kind of spilled over into this, just a health goal they wanted to accomplish. And I was like, okay, so how do we connect this goal to beyond just something you're trying to remove shame and feel better about who you are? That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs to be something larger that is you making this choice out of the impact you can have.
Yeah.
Right? So
It's
it's a
much
big
more
idea.
sustainable that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the ways that we describe that struggle, so the ambition leads to the pressure or the challenge. One of the other words we use in this flow is doubts. So as you are pursuing this thing, again, ambition towards something, it's going to amplify the pressure.
Yeah.
As you want. As you go after that, there will be resistance, or you will need to source other things to get you there to cross the gap. It's going to create some doubts. And I'm not sure what's making you chuckle, but I know that word doubt has resonated with clients as we've worked with them, because it's like, well, yeah, like I have doubts all the time.
Yeah.
I have doubts about the choice. I have doubts about the direction. I have doubts about who I am as a person. Can they go with me on this journey? Like, doubts are just so universal. So share a little bit more about that specific angle.
Yeah.
As a leader is walking through this idea of this impact struggle.
Yeah, the doubts are going to show up even if you have confidence based on past performance, or it is a future uncertain reality you're trying to get to. And so just to normalize that, like, you want to learn how to sit with mental doubts and transform them, but not have doubts in the way you take action. So it's like there's an old wisdom saying that says if you have doubts, you're an unstable, double-minded person. And it's almost predictive of the fact that you're not going to get where you want to go. That's not talking about mental doubts. It's talking about hesitations that happen in your action. So to get to the preferred future that you see in your head, you have to commit with a clarity of action that you're like, this is what I'm going for, and I'm going all in on it. We're talking about mental doubts. So mental doubts can cause you to suffer based on even things you should have past confidence on or future uncertainty. So past confidence, here's an example. A number of years ago, I was pretty aggressively into running and trail running. Now, this is what's crazy. Mark, I would have on my app, it would tell me the total miles for the month. Like, I would have 120 miles in running for the month. And if I missed a run, there were days that I was like, I'm not a runner. I'm a big fraud, right? That mental doubt that kicks in, it's always going to be connected at its core to identity if you can discern it. And even though I should have a past confidence, like, no, I've been a runner for a few years now. This is a normal thing. People know that I do this. Dude, I got told I was in the running to be a finalist for a Lululemon thing where they like hook you up with clothes. I wasn't supposed to know it. I didn't get it. But it wasn't for leadership. It was because of my running. And then I had a little bit of a public role as an author or whatever. And I was like, that's funny. And I wasn't even that good either. But the point of that is you could have something, and we see this, like a CEO's at 10 million or 100 million. They can still have doubts about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then they can have doubts about their being. And they can't let their doubts about their being seep into their doing. So how do we deal with that? And then, this is the future uncertainty. Okay, so I can lead the organization at 30 million, but can I lead it at 50 million? I can lead it at 2 billion. Can I lead it at 4 billion? Does my leadership team have what it takes? Whatever. So then you're getting into the future uncertainties that you haven't really accomplished yourself in a way that you can be confident. You are also in that moment going to have being doubts and doing doubts show up. How do you get very direct and clear and committed on the doing doubts and understand the being doubts so they don't hold you back?
Yeah. I think one of the coolest things regarding doubts is this idea that having doubts isn't the problem, isn't the issue. Doubts are common. Everybody's got doubts.
Yeah.
They just surface the opportunity.
Yeah.
You say it better than I do, I'm sure. But it's reframing this idea that doubts are the problem. Because I have doubts, therefore I have a problem, or I can't let anybody else know that I have doubts. It's reframing that to be like, no, doubts are showing me where there's opportunity, there's room for growth, there's the stretch that I need to make, or the decision that I need to take. It's how many times have I said reframing? This is probably about 4 times now.
Let me take a drink.
Right, exactly. It's just looking at it a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, if we're going to take them deeper, it's understanding you're not doing something wrong because you have the doubts. You don't beat up on yourself because you have the doubts. Like, that's the fuel. That's the clue. That's the signal. Well, how? We'll get into that as we progress. But that fuel and that signal is to help you understand, I am going somewhere I've never gone before.
Yep.
You know, and for me to build on the past confidence I have into this present uncertainty, these doubts are going to help me understand what part in me needs to be trained and developed. So I'm going to learn in an expansive capacity about who I am. And like you said, it's going to help me understand, where do I need to clear things up with myself, with others, with systems, with structure, with miscommunications, with where relationships need to be realigned. All of that, those doubts are showing you, if you can do it with your eyes wide open with awareness, this honing signal of what you need to be paying attention to.
Yeah. Okay, so just 2 more thoughts relative to this. The ambition, and I would add this as one of those 2 thoughts. Whether it's a small ambition, a small thing, so to speak, or a big thing, this is still true. It doesn't matter the size of the ambition. If you are going after something, that ambition will lead to pressure. That pressure will surface the doubts. And that's the inflection point where it becomes, I'm leading for validation or I'm leading for impact. That's thing 1. Thing 2 is a callback to a couple episodes ago where we were talking about vision in this context, because often ambition, big vision are related. You might be interested in going back to the episode we did a number of episodes ago on 5 stages of a vision, and just understanding the process that everyone goes through as they are pursuing a vision, the ups and the downs, where the doubts are going to surface just in the process of pursuing a vision, so that you can have these things, these 2 things in mind as you're going after whatever it is you're going after.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I would not, like, a leader that's dangerous is on both sides of this extreme. The one that's hyper vigilant, constantly driving everyone by those doubts. The other one that is rushing past the doubts. And again, they don't have to be held captive by them, but not being aware of how it's causing their behavior to over and underdo certain things, which we'll get into. You know, that's a red flag, right? Instead, I'm much more courageous to follow a leader who says this. I can't promise a certain outcome, but as we've wrestled with this, here's the clear path we need to commit to, and let's go at it like this is going to work. And if not, we'll upgrade and update to what will.
Yeah.
That's so much more honest, and it requires so much less deconstruction on the other side when your plan doesn't go like you wanted it to.
Yeah, that's
which
great.
hardly ever does.
That's great. Okay, so there's the model, the impact leader struggle is what we call that. Now let's introduce the tool. And what I'd like you to do as I'm setting this up, just be thinking about some specific examples of where we see this in play, or where you've experienced this with clients. But let me introduce this idea of a validation check. So this becomes a tool that you can use for yourself, for your teams, for your organization to assess whether you're drifting, trending toward impact or toward validation. And we'll paint a couple of extremes here, and it's unlikely that you're going to always be to one extreme or the other. And it's also unlikely that in all the areas that you could assess yourself, they're going to be the same.
Yeah.
This is going to be different depending on the specific context that you're assessing. But the idea is there's 3 different elements here where you can assess whether you are trending toward impact or you're trending toward validation. On the top, I'll just set this up. On the top, you can think of it as on the impact side. Think of it like visually on the left side, caring.
Might show a visual.
Well, there you go too.
And we'll see if it focuses in. If it doesn't, that's okay. Life is short.
On the top, it's caring on the impact side, bitter on the validation side in the context of relationships or people in particular. In the middle, it is calm on the impact side or anger on the validation side. And then at the very bottom, relative to the thing that you want, or maybe set it in the context of like the vision that you're going after. Sacrifice, a willingness to pay the price is how I like to think about sacrifice in this context on the impact side, or dread for what it's going to take on the validation side. So caring to bitter, calm to anger, sacrifice to dread, 3 different levels: relationship, missional, and then really what it's going to require of me, the person. This is what we call the validation check.
I love it. I mean, and you made it so much clearer than the image did. The auto focus on the camera, but they can see it in the book. But the point of that is that, you said it, this drift that's so natural. So it's a validation check, and you can bring this awareness to yourself by just taking, and I'll walk through 3 examples. Would that be good on each of the 3?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start like at the top and peel it back, because it's a little bit easier to start simple and then get it to the core. But you just take one relationship where you're caring to bitter. You may not be in full over bitterness, but just it's a gradient scale. You may be 1 mark over from caring. And so take any problem relationship you have right now, or any circumstance with a relationship that's really challenging. How natural it is when they're not meeting your needs to start to get bitter towards them. You know, they say now quiet quitting is a huge thing, and people don't quit their job, they quit their manager. Well, maybe their manager is terrible and they should quit. Maybe also, too, there's a miscommunication. What was said, what was heard, what was meant are 3 different things. They're not getting what they needed. The manager doesn't even know it. I mean, we do talk to people and we hear horror stories of who they work for, but we also talk to people who it's just situations where they could have been honest about their needs.
Yep.
So this caring starts to drift to bitter so quickly because they don't care about me. They don't realize what I'm doing for the organization or how I'm giving. Or you could apply this to a long-term love interest, partner, or spouse. It's like, they're taking me for granted. And this is how they're taking me for granted. And if they really appreciated me, this is what they would be doing. Well, you're just moving those dash marks over. And so if for you, relationally, the way that you're showing up in your most challenging relationship right now, you're the one becoming bitter. Even if they're a person you're not relationally committed to in an organization, you're actually suffering more than they are, because that's going to rot you from the inside. So you're going to, without awareness, start showing up in a way like this gun cocked and ready to fire, and you're in a meeting, and then they throw something down, and it's not even related, and you're like, well, the problem is my favorite snack is blank, and I've told you that 5 times, and we still don't have it in the break room, which I'm using a funny example here, but it's much bigger than that, and I know it's more serious than that. So that caring to bitter draft.
Yeah, so go back to the example that you used at the beginning of this episode where you're coming home and it's been a day, it's been a week, it's been a month, and they're not recognizing that. Whoever they is at home,
Yeah.
I mean, depending on how much expectation you want to put on a 2-year-old. But if there's another adult that you're coming home to,
Yeah.
someone that is meaningful to you, and they are not recognizing what you've been up against.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very easy to start feeling more on the bitter side in that relationship because they're not meeting my need, they're not recognizing I'm doing all of this and I'm not getting any validation for it. There's that word again.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Take a sip.
There's these advanced like protocols we can give you, but at the end of the day, they're not going to help you if you are stepping into situations not aware of how you're driven by they don't get me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought it to that because that's such a powerful way to just help us understand. It's pervasive. And very easily, then you just drop down to the next line. Take any problem you have right now, like this pernicious, gnarly problem that is not solving itself. It's not going away. It's festering. And you think about how you relate to that problem from a standpoint of a calm serenity. Your mind is ordered. You know what you need to do. You know a new system you need to build or something you need to stop doing or something you need to improve or whatever. There's that mindset, right? And I know what that's like. I love getting in that space where I could have like so many things that need to be collated and organized in my workflow and I can just zoom through it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm angry, okay? And I may not be full on anger. I'm just a couple dash marks over. And I'm like, I'm getting into that place where I'm doing it for my validation, not impact. So I am making it about me. And my brain then isn't accessing its full intuitive creative capacity. And I start, then you can see how easily it moves into the bitter relationship. I start moving into the bitterness because I'm like, what's the problem? This is what this sounds like. And I've heard CEOs of smaller companies that get really stuck at not building an executive team of mature, capable leaders saying things like, I do it better than all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're getting angry, right? And it's crazy. I mean, I've heard them say things like, I could sweep the floors better than them. And I'm like, well, then why did you hire them? Well, you hired them because of your insecurities. But the point of this is so quickly you can just use this to recognize where you're at. And it's not just about your emotional piece.
Yeah.
That's a part of it.
Yeah.
It's about you can't access the processing you need to solve that problem in a healthy, effective way. And that's because you're doing it for your own validation.
I'm glad you mentioned it's not just about emotional piece. What I was thinking is the message here isn't trying to manufacture emotion. It is noticing the signals and the clues that these emotions offer you. It's data.
Yeah.
We're looking at data. And the data is telling me that I'm drifting more toward anger.
Yep.
And it's causing me to feel bitterness toward so-and-so. And so once you notice it, once you see it, then you can begin to do something about it. But until you see it, it's there, it's driving you, but essentially you're in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
You're not in the driver's seat at that point.
You made me think of, we recently put this on our page for our measurement tool, the IFQ, because it was a quote from a company, and she was like, yeah, you can't work on what you don't know is there.
Yeah.
Just a simple, straightforward way to say it. And that's a great way to remind us it's about the data. And then if you can get awareness on that, then you can peel back to the bottom layer. And this is at the deepest level, sacrifice to dread. Now, these are big words to use, but the reality is this: at the deepest level, you have a vision. You may not see the vision. You may not have taken it from the subconscious to the conscious, but like, how do you picture your life in health at 75, right? If you've kind of resigned to the fact that you'll be fairly immobile at 75, then you'll slowly drift towards actions and activities that do that, and you'll begrudgingly move into aging with a sense of dread, which happens all the freaking time, right? So whatever is the vision, it's the organizational vision, it's the team vision, it's the personal vision, you will not get where you want to go without sacrifice. You have to pay a price. Now, I don't know what that price is for you, and a lot of times cheesy, shallow way people interpret this quickly is they go, oh, well, it's a sacrifice of values.
Mm,
No, that's not the idea. That's not really sacrifice. Sacrifice is I'm going to keep my values. I want to be present with my family when they were little, and I want to build this vision of what Sight Shift is now. So how do I sacrifice in a way that still keeps the values,
yeah.
but eyes wide open, I understand I'm paying a price for a later, greater future reality. Well, what did that do for me? That kept me, to get where we are now, in the game over a decade with energy that renewed along the way rather than a gradual fading from a sense of dread, because it was a willing sacrifice. This is the price I'm going to have to pay to get where I need to go.
Yep.
And what happens for a leader when they get to this place? The things that shut most people down, it's because they feel humiliated. Because the sacrifice they've made comes back at them in a way that they've got to ask something of others they don't want to. They've got to admit something. And what I've found more often than not, it's the insecurity of your ego that you're sacrificing.
Mm.
But that's not really a sacrifice, because eventually you can become so internally resilient within that humiliation doesn't humiliate you. You're like, well, I've died before. What's going to happen?
And
I can get humble. I can get more humble.
it's not an apathy.
Yeah.
Right. I
Exactly.
think that's coming through clear, but
Thank you.
lest we make that assumption,
Yeah.
it's not apathy. It's not just resigned to, like the Eeyore. Oh, woe is me. It's a peace in that moment, or it's a willingness to experience that humiliation and be okay with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you're there, it's like, okay, there's a cost to be paid, and these are the parameters of that payment I'm willing to make. And as I pay that price, yeah, your desire doesn't decrease.
Yeah.
You want it more.
Yeah.
Because it's, again, this renewing energy. You're not fading. The brightness of the future that you see and the way that you engage your life presently to get to it only gets brighter and sharper. And I've seen that, in my life and the people we work with, the companies we work with. And if they can lock in on this, and in this, I think there is a comment to make here. This assumes something. This assumes that you have a future picture horizon you're committed to, right? Which is why when we work through this with organizations, if they don't have that, and they usually have something nebulous, something fuzzy, something too far off in the distance, if they don't have something in the way that we frame it, which is going to be the most psychologically activating thing, what are we sacrificing for?
Yeah.
Then you get in that spot where let's sacrifice again another year, but there's no benchmark we're getting to where the payoff starts to materialize in a way that it worked. We know it worked, but that's a whole separate assumption.
Separate episode too, probably.
Oh, is it? Yeah, we can do that one as a separate episode.
Yeah. The person I was referring to earlier that I was coaching with recently was drifting in all three of these sections, was drifting toward the validation side. And that renewing energy that you were talking about, if I were to give a visual, person came into the conversation just weighed down with the heaviness of the sacrifice, starting to feel like dread and frustration in the middle of things that aren't going the way they had anticipated, or more problems are surfacing than they had anticipated. Relationships are feeling the strain. And because of the space that was created, and taking him back to the why, the motivation, the original vision, as he left the session, the weight was lifted, and the body language was just like, yeah, I'm willing to pay the price here, because I'm reminded again of why, what this vision means to me. I'm continuing to choose to lean into this and face this adversity because this is what I want. This is what I'm going after, and here are the reasons why.
And not to let that go. Here are the reasons why, because there are a lot of people that were helped by Simon Sinek's Start with Why, And that's a key verb. Start with why, but get to the why you want it.
Yeah.
And that's when you really can lock in.
I wonder, you are in the field a lot, working with CEOs, business owners, founders, and you are using this validation check all the time. I wonder if there's one moment from recent past that comes to mind as you were working through this with someone where there was that shift, or that that light bulb went on in the conversation that was really helpful to the other person.
Yeah. So this was with a leadership team, and their responsibility area was around system improvement. I can't remember exactly now. And their profile and our measurement was around overvaluing data and undervaluing emotion. And so because of that, we were able to paint a picture for her team, like, here's the problems you're having on your team, and this is the first time we've met her. And she's like, oh my gosh, how did you know all this? Well, and we start to talk through it. So then her big connection dot, because of your insecurities, her big connection dot was like, oh my gosh, I'm leading for validation and I'm getting bitter, just a few dash marks over, frustratingly engaging them in a way that's growing into bitterness, because they're asking me to pay attention to something that I don't value. And it's their emotional experience, and this isn't about coddling, and it's not about a therapeutic world where we can't advance on the mission in bold and ambitious ways. It's just about that specific profile needs to understand seeing the whole person and the whole issue is seeing the data and the emotion. But because she was leading for validation, not impact, she was overvaluing the data and undervaluing emotion.
Yeah. So are you leading for validation or impact? As you are pursuing ambition, it's going to surface pressure. It's going to then surface or create doubts. That becomes that moment that you can pay attention to, and the tool that you can pay attention to it through, or the tool that will help you to pay attention to what's going on inside of you, this validation check. Where in my relationships am I drifting from caring to bitter? Where in my doing or tasks or projects or my goals, objectives, am I drifting from calm to anger? And what is that doing in me as I think about the price that needs to be paid for what I want, whatever it is, big or little, whatever I want? Where am I drifting from I'm willing to pay the price to, I'm dreading this thing that I'm pursuing? That's the validation check. And it's a tool that you can put in your toolbox to pay attention to what's going on in you. Anything else that you would offer before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I mean, just at the core, it's if you're dreading the role you're fulfilling, dreading your day, dreading your schedule, that will come back and be way worse later. And it doesn't change overnight, but you just got to own and accept that fact. Don't shame yourself. Acceptance is the beginning. Just accept that the dread is there, and more to come.
Cool. Well, that's episode 2 in this Lead for Impact series. We have a number more to come, so look for those in the future. We're going to keep going through this. And in the meantime, if you want a little bit more information, you want more about what we do here at SiteShift, you're curious, just go to the website, siteshift.com, and you can find what you are looking for there. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
Thanks for joining me on this episode. There's always more for you at SiteShift, SIGHT, shift.com, to be the leader you were meant to be.